Thank you very much, Kate, and welcome back everyone for our afternoon session. So this morning we talked about the hub strategy, and we talked about the 4 pillars as part of the hub strategy. Rebecca also just reminded us of those pillars. So that's the observatory, it's connecting and community building, training and knowledge, and research and analysis. So those 4 pillars are one part of the strategy, but there's a second element to the strategy that we will get to now, which is that the hub's work going forward will be structured around thematic areas. And the first thematic area that we have chosen, and again, as with all parts of the strategy, that choice was based on the engagement we did. The first thematic area that we have chosen is the area of trustworthy AI as a horizontal area that thinks about trustworthy AI issues across sectors, across use cases. So that's going to be the starting point. That's going to be the focus of the hub's activities over the next 6 months or so. But the long-term strategy for the hub is to then start thinking about adding vertical thematic areas to that work. So those vertical thematic areas could either be industry verticals, for example, thinking about the use of AI in financial services or in healthcare, for example. It could also be verticals dedicated to particular use cases more narrowly. And so the long-term vision is to have work that considers issues horizontally, complemented by work streams that have a vertical focus. And that, in a sense, very much reflects what we already see in the standardization landscape out there. So if you take a look at the standards database on our website, you will see that there's a whole raft of standards under development, some of them already published, that take a horizontal perspective, but there are also already dedicated standards, for example, for AI in healthcare. So it's very clear that the final picture that we will end up with, in the coming years, in terms of AI standardization, will be a combination of horizontal and vertical standards. But the starting point, and I'll say a bit more about the reasoning behind that, for the hub will be to think about these issues horizontally, to then be in a position to inform thinking about what might be particular considerations that apply to particular verticals. Now, talking a bit more about trustworthy AI as a thematic area, what do we mean by it, and why did we choose this topic? It's worth briefly talking about the definition at a very high level of the topic for the purposes of the hub. I'll keep this very brief because I think most of you in the audience are familiar with debates about trustworthy AI. The main point here really is to say that we take a deliberately broad approach to defining trustworthy AI for the purposes of the hub. So we think of trustworthy AI as the challenge of ensuring that AI systems are ethical, that they work as expected, and that they're used responsibly. And we know that there are challenges in all of those areas. So we know that in the development and use of AI systems, there are challenges and significant ethical issues that can arise. We know that there are challenges around ensuring that systems work as expected, especially as systems become more complex and less explainable, among other things. And we know that there are issues around responsible use and appropriate use, making sure that there is appropriate human oversight, and so on and so forth. So as we approach that topic of trustworthy AI, we're considering all of these various aspects. The other thing to mention is that we are equally going to be thinking about technical as well as non-technical aspects. So we know that AI systems are socio-technical systems in nature. A lot of issues that arise are issues that will have to be addressed at the technical level, but there are also very important issues that are of a non-technical nature, such as thinking again about appropriate human oversight, for example, thinking about communication around AI systems, be it to users or the general public, and so on and so forth. So again, the main point here, we're including both technical and non-technical aspects. And then finally, to say that trustworthy AI, of course, is an umbrella term in many ways for a wide range of specific trustworthiness characteristics, so specific features that AI systems must have in order to be considered trustworthy. And on the slide here, these are, of course, just some examples. These include transparency, fairness, reliability, safety, security or privacy, among several others. And one of the things that came out of the engagement we did was a very strong demand for work that focuses on particular characteristics, specifically drills down into the specifics of how can those characteristics be achieved, rather than having general work around trustworthy AI as a broad concept. And so that's the reason why we have chosen 3 particular topics, and we'll get to those in a moment. We'll take turns presenting those. We've chosen 3 particular topics within the thematic area of trustworthy AI that we will be addressing and looking at and engaging the community around in the coming months. A couple of quick words, having talked about what we mean by trustworthy AI, about why we have chosen this focus. And in particular, why are we choosing to approach this topic from a horizontal perspective rather than thinking about particular verticals at the outset. So one clear, simple reason for this is that challenges of trustworthy AI arise in any context where AI is used, across sectors, across use cases. And therefore, there is a need to be able to connect trustworthiness debates in different areas of AI application, and standards, of course, are one way to achieve and to enable those joined-up conversations. There is also a connection to the work that Rebecca highlighted earlier, the significant work that we've seen over the last few years in terms of developing principles and governance frameworks for AI. So a lot of that work, including at an international level, has focused on specifying principles, general approaches. What is very much needed in the current stage of AI adoption and AI development is to translate those principles into concrete, agreed best practices on how to implement those principles. And standards, again, are one way, of course, one important way to achieve that, to achieve the implementation or operationalization of principles into concrete practices. A third factor is a factor around policy developments and regulatory developments. Rebecca already mentioned the EU AI Act, which will see a range of standards that will be developed to support compliance with the AI Act, and a lot of those standards will be horizontal in nature. So that's one simple reason to, again, start with this focus. And then a final reason is the fact that if we look at the existing landscape of standards that are being developed, there is really a very, very active space of horizontal standards that are already under development across different SDOs. And I'll stop here and hand over to Tim to give us a brief overview of what those horizontal standards that are currently under development look like.
Yeah. Thank you. So, as has been mentioned, the AI Standards Hub covers a series of bodies. I think it's worth sort of reiterating what those are. So it's national standards bodies, including BSI, CEN, CENELEC, ETSI, ISO, IEEE, IEC, and the ITU. And we focus mainly into CEN, CENELEC, ISO, and IEC. So trustworthiness has been a key theme of standardization in AI from very early on. So whether that's the sort of pioneering work we were doing around robotic ethics, or the original work around big data, which Peter mentioned earlier. Thank you, Peter, for that. Also, the great work that IEEE did very early on around ethically aligned design for autonomous systems. So what's on the screen is just a subset of what's available around trustworthiness in AI or in development. And it just reflects what's in ISO IEC, but there's lots of other work that's going on. And as you've already been encouraged to do, I'll go and look at the Standards Observatory and see what's there. And as Florian mentioned, most of it is cross-cutting at the moment, but I'm sure with time there'll be much more of a focus towards particular sectors. So one of the things I want to really sort of pull out, which we're going to mention a lot over the next 6 months, is the management system standard that's coming through. And this is a standard that sits in an organisation and really puts a particular subject at the heart of an organisation. So the standard itself is going to be ISO IEC 42001, and it's going to focus on sort of governance and strategy of the organisation, and really put AI at the core of it. As it happens, it'll be out for public comment very shortly, so that everyone can feed in. And akin to the other standards it's like 9001, which put quality management in the manufacturing sector, or 27001, which puts cybersecurity at the heart of the organisation. This is what we really expect the standard to do. And I'll now hand over to Stuart. Thanks. But as I say, I encourage you to look at the observatory and come back to us with comments.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tim. The metrology community has gone on a bit of a journey in the last 5 years. So if anybody in the audience knows the International System of Units, we've very much moved from living in the artifact world. So Sonny mentioned earlier on this morning around a kilogram being a specific artifact that is used to provide a reference point much more towards what fundamental constants. And so particular redefinition of the kilogram is a fantastic example. And what's come with that is the metrology community has had to sort of reassess what that means for measurement and measurement standards. So Rebecca's just presented where there is measurement standard activity already underway and going on. The specific, the niche, they've got a particular focus. And the metrology community have sort of reflected on this. And MPL's played a leading role in the European community, so part of Euromet, which is the European metrology community, and part of the partnership framework that we work through the MPA scheme. The focus really is very much an understanding of what the requirements for measurement standards are. I don't think any of these topics that you'll see on the screen will come as a surprise. And so recently a strategic research agenda has been set as part of that European community that in effect is a statement of intent as what measurement standards needs to encompass around trustworthy machine learning, trustworthy AI. We do focus as a community on machine learning because it's a data-driven approach. We very much see it as an analytical engine of what AI is. It's not to say that we don't have thoughts and views on neural networks, deep learning, but the reality is we've got a specific approach to take around physics-based models, a principled approach, and making sure that we are data-driven. So the 4 areas that we've highlighted as a community that we really need to be focusing on is uncertainty quantification. I will go into that in a little bit more detail on a follow-on slide and what that means for trustworthy machine learning. Generalizability and robustness of the models, the algorithms and how they're applied. Interpretability, which many people understand and realise that it's a key factor and key point that we need to address. And putting quality frameworks around that. If you're going to measure something, then you've got to know that you've measured the correct thing, that it's got fitness for purpose, and how it's applied. And I think that's a key role that where we see metrology, the NMI community, underpinning what we're trying to do in trustworthy AI, trustworthy machine learning. One addition to that is I think where LMPL can play a key role in the Standards Hub is that international engagement as part of the community, because this is a European-focused approach, and we're very aware of NIST and their AI risk assurance framework approach that they're taking, and there's got to be a collaborative and coordinated approach to what metrology contributes to trustworthiness and trustworthy AI. So I'll hand back to Florian.
Thank you, Stuart. So having gone through this sort of general overview and big picture on trustworthy AI, what we'd like to briefly do now is give you a more concrete preview of the activities that we are planning within this thematic area over the next 6 months. And as I've already mentioned, the plan for the hub is within this thematic area to focus on 3 specific topics within trustworthy AI. Those topics are, firstly, transparency and explainability, secondly, safety, security, and resilience, and thirdly, uncertainty quantification. And each of the partner organizations is going to take a lead on one of these topics. We'll, of course, collaborate closely, but for each topic, we'll sort of bring the specific expertise and strengths that one of our organizations has in this area to inform and shape that work. For each topic, so we'll roll them out in sequence. So the first topic, say over the next 2 months roughly, will be transparency and explainability. That's where the focus of the action will be. That's going to be followed by the second topic, and then later in the spring next year, the third topic. In each area, the activities will take a form of a combination of different formats. all of that facilitated by the online platform. So on the online platform, we'll have content, we'll have blog posts, discussion forums dedicated to each topic. But we'll also have a program of live events. So we'll do webinars to go into more depth, to look at the existing standards landscape within a particular topic. We'll also do workshops and a variety of other formats. So we very much hope that, going back to what we discussed this morning, you'll of course join us in being active on the online platform, but also bear in mind that the online platform is just a backbone, and there's an important program of live activity that will be coming in addition to the online platform, and of course all of that activity will be announced via the event section on the platform. Now we'll just very quickly give you an overview for each topic and sort of what motivates it, and I'll start with transparency and explainability. So why did we choose this as one of the three topics? The concept of transparency and explainability is at the core of many debates around trustworthy AI. For one thing, transparency is an important value in its own right, but it's also clear that in addition to that, transparency plays an important enabling role in achieving other trustworthiness characteristics such as safety or fairness, among others. So it's an important area. There's a lot of theoretical work, a lot of technical work within this area, but it's also a very complex topic, as this graph illustrates. And it's a topic where, as a result of that complexity, we currently often see a lack of agreed terminology in how to describe different aspects of transparency explainability. We also see a wide range of technical approaches that can be applied to achieving those objectives. And it's an ongoing area of research, but certainly in many cases there's sort of a lack of consensus on what the best approach is to solve the problem at a technical level. On the social side, the socio-technical side, there are important questions around transparency in the sense of communicating information to different types of stakeholders, different audiences, not just technical audience, but also thinking about the information that consumers might need or users that don't have technical expertise. So a lot of questions around that communication aspects. And then finally, transparency explainability can serve a whole range of different purposes, and the right answer to what the best approach to take will depend on the purpose that it's meant to serve. So the bottom line of all of that is it's a lot of complexity in this space, a need for a greater agreement, consolidated view on what how the topic should be described, both terminologically, but then also trying to get to an agreement on what best practices are from a substantive point of view. And so what we'll try within this topic is to make sense of this complexity, look at and particularly think about the role of standards in addressing the complexity. So look at the existing landscape of standards that are already under development within transparency explainability, think about the extent to which they match up with best practices that have been developed elsewhere, to what extent they're designed to address explainability needs, what gaps may exist, and so on and so forth. So those are some of the questions we'll be looking at within this area, and I'll pass over to Tim for the second topic.
So, as was mentioned, we'll be looking at resilience, security, and safety. So, as has been mentioned a few times today, AI really brings in some sort of new challenges. And for all three of these, they are quite established areas of standardization. So in terms of resilience, there's established work around organizational resilience, business continuity, risk management that really helps organizations survive and thrive, especially in all the change that's going on in recent years and still going on. Around security, and specifically cybersecurity, there's about 30 years of standardization that's been helping organizations and economies protect themselves against cyber threats. In terms of safety, particularly around product safety, there's a lot of focus about how you take what were previously static products that now have software inside that may be changing, and how that fits with the particularly the regulatory regime in the UK, the EU, and elsewhere. So, to give you a bit of a flavour of these, I've come up with some of the things that we may be looking through in these particular topics, but the reality is, as Florian mentioned, for all of these we're doing work and doing research, and it's going to be what is based on standards that are there, what the community wants, rather than what we think the issues might be. So in terms of resilience, as Rebecca mentioned, there's an AI risk management standard coming very soon. There's also much more that needs to be done to ensure resilience is at the core of organisations around AI. But equally, it's a much more granular level in terms of the models. Can they deal with outlier or unexpected data? Are they resilient to being manipulated, which particularly think about people using them for job interviews or credit scoring is going to be the case? And can they be accurate over time as the data comes through? Around security, looking particularly at cybersecurity. So the market for cybercrime is about $6 trillion a year and growing about 15% a year. And cyber criminals are extremely innovative and are using AI now. So the other side is how can we better use AI to protect organisations? And as AI grows more and more and becomes the key intellectual property of organisations, how can that be better protected? Around safety, as I mentioned, the sort of changes around products and how that fits with AI, but equally bringing AI into existing sectors. How does that then affect how risk is dealt with, how liability is dealt with, and some of those may or may not be subjects of standardisation. So in terms of how we're planning to tackle this, we obviously will be talking and bringing in ideas, but over the next few months, a lot of it will be behind the scenes, sort of really examining these topics. And if any of you have practical experience of implementing AI and see the challenges around security, safety, and resilience, we really want to talk to you and get that expertise brought in. And we'll bring that all back together with a workshop in January and then present the results back in February and talking a lot about it from then on inwards. I'll now hand over to Stuart.
So MPL will focus on uncertainty quantification and what that means for metrology, particularly focused around machine learning. We'll take a similar approach where it'll be webinars, education and communication through training, but we're very keen to encourage people to engage through the research and development platform within the hub, because we're actively seeking engagement and feedback on the approach that we're proposing or working as part of the European metrology community on our approach to what looks like an uncertainty quantification or is an uncertainty quantification framework for machine learning. And what do we mean by uncertainty? It's got many different meanings to different people, but in metrology perspective, there's two forms, the random effects, and then the uncertainty about the parameters of the model. And if you try to address these singularly, there's ways to do that, but in complex systems like machine learning, there are trade-offs and issues or challenges to address these to in effect get a full and understanding and comprehensive idea of how uncertainty propagates through a system. So this is the approach that we're proposing, this pyramid model in terms where we try to look at and address model biases. We have generalizability as much as possible and applicable. We try to understand random effects, account for insufficient data, poor data quality, and have quality frameworks around data itself, understanding how that then propagates through a system, and taking a principled and scalable approach, principled in effect from a data-driven approach, because we work in measurement standards, physics-based organisation that work with data and from a measurement perspective. And if I could put it into context a little bit and bring it to life in relation to some of the conversation that's taken place this morning, we talk about assured autonomy. And then from a metrology perspective, a measurement standards perspective, we look at this and say, well, what's the role for an NMI, MPL? Where do we fit? And if you think about it, an assured autonomous vehicle, in effect, is a suite of sensors. So it's a sensor network. It's a complex system. So if you go back to a very basic approach of the LiDAR, radar, or camera that's on that autonomous system, it becomes a very, very complex system very quickly when you put multiple suites of measurement modalities into the system. So in effect, MPL and the metrology community have had to adapt very quickly to understand what that complex system is and how we understand the uncertainty that can propagate through that. Different measurement modalities, characterized, analyzed in different ways, come together, and then you apply machine learning and algorithms to it. There's where your uncertainty propagates, and that's where understanding the measurement from the very beginning and how that propagates in is a key factor and a key role that we're looking to play. So keen for people to engage, interact, feedback through the R&D community on the hub, but particularly engage through training as well. So, thank you.